Hello and welcome back to the Wheel Talk podcast. My name is Abby Mickey. We're here to talk about women's professional road cycling. I'm joined by Gracie Elvin.
G'day. I'm going to just continue with the awkward Aussie. Hello. You just keep it going. I like that Tills pointed that out last week. I'm not going to improve on it. Just keep it.
It's our last fully Australian episode before we turn our attention to elsewhere in the world. Yeah, and we also have Matilda Raynolds. Tills is back with us this episode.
Oh, as the Aussies would say, no, don't go. Hi team. Yeah, thanks so much for having me back. It's so nice just to be able to talk women's cycling. So yeah, it's a pleasure.
We've got an awesome episode today. We've got to talk about the Deakin University Road Race, Cadell's, as it's more commonly known. It was an awesome race, another surprise winner, and I think that's going to be the bulk of the episode. We're just going to dive in. It was another surprise winner. As we talked about last week, it seems like it's always a surprise winner at this race. And again, this year we had Rosita Reinhout, the 19-year-old on Visma Lease bike, took the win solo, narrowly took the win solo. And yeah, her first win. Like it's her first, it's not even her first World Tour win, it's her first win. So pretty impressive.
Yeah, epic. Like I'm pretty sure she wasn't on anyone's list.
Yeah. Except her team's list, because apparently they were working for her.
Yeah, she's such a sweet kid. I feel like calling her a kid, but I know she's like a wonderful, really strong woman. But she was, I had a bit of time with her on, we had this great sort of opening ceremony or welcome ceremony to the event where they've done it a few years now, but they have, a really good sort of welcome to country. And so I was sort of explaining to the Visma team about the Indigenous culture and where it's at, and just giving them the background of why, we're getting smoked out, which was welcoming to the land. And just a really, really nice, great person, really. She, and even in the only time I saw her during the race really was I was just quite small, but she was trying to get a wheel and I let her have that wheel and she was so grateful. So she's just a very sweet kid. And I think but the way she rode that end and to have the confidence to go and also the maturity to read the end of the race, I think speaks volumes. So it just, as we predicted, a random surprise winner, but also not a surprise in this particular race. So I think it was still a great ending as well.
Yeah, I loved her post-race interview when she was just so Dutch, and she was like, well, the race, they were coming back and the race was going and I went. Like, it's just like, yeah, obviously that was the choice that I made, was to go. Where like you had Cecilie Uttrup-Ludwig, a much more experienced rider, kind of holding back at that point, or she said after the race that she was just cooked by the time she was caught by Reinhout and Włodarczyk caught Cecilie Uttrup-Ludwig. It was a great move, and I think just highlights how different this race is from something like TDU, how different a one day is from a stage race, and also how different a race like this is from pretty much any one day we're going to see in Europe, barring a couple of the random non-World Tour races in Spain usually end this way. The ones that are over in the Basque region usually have surprise winners, but it's pretty rare that we see a World Tour one-day race end in such a way, which is pretty cool, with two basically unknown riders on the top two steps.
But there was plenty of like well-known riders in the race. Like it was cool this year in both Tour Down Under and Cadell's to see probably the best fields ever that we've seen in Australia, like, and depth, I guess, and very international. So yeah, it wasn't an easy bike race to win.
Yeah, I guess if we take it back to the start, I think the biggest surprise was that Amanda Spratt was not starting. So that was she was the only one not to sign on that day. And then we also knew that Loretta Hanson was carrying a little bit of sickness as well. She'd been wearing a mask at the dining table when she was grabbing her food. So I think, as we sort of said last week, we've almost been in this world tour down under bubble for well over 3 weeks now, where we all have our meals together. We're staying in uni accommodation, both in Adelaide, and then similar to we stay at the Deakin University, which is super nice, but and really good food and everything in Geelong as well. But you pretty much see everyone of the whole peloton every day. So I think a lot of sickness had been starting to go around a little bit. And yeah, it was, so you saw Loretta pull out just at kilometre 0, which gave Trek, I think, 3 riders I think they had there. So they needed 4 to start. So she had to start. And so that sort of really changed the dynamic, because it was quite windy on the day. So we were looking, if there were going to be a team that was going to split it up, it was going to be Trek, but they just absolutely had no firepower. FDJ sometimes took demand, but it was actually it was just one of those days where it was like frustratingly hard and easy. So it was like dead roads, cross headwind all the time. Nothing could really get away. One of my teammates in Bridge Lane tried to go up the road, but they just never actually got let off the leash. They were just dangling in front of us the entire time because it was just too windy. The whole bunch was nervous the entire day. And then we went over the first climb, and it's probably the biggest ever bunch that's come back together after that first climb. So we made it over, and then this to get swamped again by another bunch behind us made the second lap really challenging. And I think personally that's where I really let myself down, was just not burning enough matches to get into a good position on the second lap, because I was nervous about how the second lap would feel. But the thing is, if you're not in the fight, it doesn't really matter what you're doing, you've got to be there. And so for me, it was like Gracie, you've commentated a few of my races, I'm up the front too much. But then when I was trying to be the protected rider, I wasn't in the right position. I was trying to protect myself too much. And we have a team that wasn't able to, rally around, which was, we're a lower end Conti team. But the other teams, it's probably the most on a second lap where we've had big teams all there doing a big lead out for that second lap. So, and there was a headwind, so it was able to stay a little bit together. So for Cecily to punch off the front of that group, it would have taken a lot more effort into the headwind. And Cadell's, you've just got to be so patient. It's such a patient race in terms of attacking and knowing when to go. And even though the end is quite fast, it's one of those finishes where you've got to be really on top of your pedals, because everyone's going fast down there, so it can come back quite quickly. But I think it was evident that Cecily felt like she'd probably lost that race. She was definitely the better rider out of the three, obviously the higher profile name. And I'm really surprised, because I haven't seen the finish, so it was really surprising that she was able to punch away. The winner Rosita was able to punch away from Cecily, who has such a good punch. But as we said last week, a lot of the riders aren't used to this, going into the red, backing it up, going into the red, which was evident when we had the crit on Thursday night. Everyone just found it so hard. I don't know what it looked like from your end, Gracie, but no one got to see it. I was in it, but I was much better positioned because I was riding for someone else. But it was, everyone just hated it. It was so bloody hard. And everyone just said, this is way too early in the season for, Eleanor Baxter was just like, this is just, threshold VO2s in January is just, yeah. So, but yeah, that's sort of how it was in the middle of the race, but I'm curious how it looked from the outside.
I'll comment on you first, Matilda, and I just want to say, don't feel bad. You got to learn from both sides. I've had to learn from both kinds of experiences of riding too much in the front and then being a bit too conservative when you're protected. So that's another learning opportunity for sure. And it's really tough to like want to burn those matches before a tough section coming up. And that took me a while to figure that out in some of those bigger races where you have to like go into the red before you go into the red. Kind of, but mentally that's what it feels like. But yeah, for the race, I wasn't expecting it to really split up too much. I think as commentators, we always hype up the crosswinds on this course, but I don't think it's really ever split up in like this is the 9th edition. There's opportunities for potential, but the sand dunes and the trees and the built up areas, it just changes direction just a few too many times that it's rare to get a good wind direction and strength on that course to have good crosswind action. So yeah, I think it was definitely down to the laps. And I was surprised that there wasn't a harder attack on this first time up the climb, particularly from Sarah Gigante or someone like that. It did look hard though. It looked like they were still setting a pretty tough pace. Someone that really impressed me that looked like they were climbing pretty much the best bar Sealay's attack was Ella Wiley. I think she deserves a mention. She was just looking so fresh both times up the climb, able to match the intensity of those sustained efforts and some of the attacks that were happening. But I think Sealay's move on that second climb was quite impressive. I was really enjoying watching her. She looks like she's coming into some really great form. And maybe a good classic season coming up for her. And I think it wasn't a bad thing for her to attack there. It was just that it's just that course that if you can still stay within striking distance and if you can just hide a little bit like Rosita did and let other people drag you back, it's not even that next climb that does the difference. It's the flat section. Often, like I've seen heaps of attacks go on that flat straight. I think it's Minerva Road. And that's where they go because that's where everyone just has that breath and looks around. And for a young rider, I can't speak to her mentality, but I love seeing young riders kind of go all in because they don't have that pressure on themselves to be the winner. They just go, wow, this is the opportunity. I got to go. Like, and as she said, it was such a Dutch thing to say in the interview, but like that's pure racing. And sometimes you get the best results from riders like that don't have that pressure of like, oh, but I've got a teammate behind and what should I do? Or like she just raced on instinct. And she was able to win. She obviously was having a great day physically, but it's the other favourites that are looking then at each other and they just don't have enough time to get organised as that fast run into the finish. So it was pretty exciting though, that last kilometre. The small chase group behind Sealay and Dominica chasing Rosita, and they were so close on the line, and you could see that Sealay, she did ride that pretty hard. Like she went all in to try and win that race, and she had to burn every single match there. So I don't think she finished the race thinking she should have done much different. I don't think she was just disappointed that it wasn't the win, and then she let out quite early as well. So she just got pipped on the line and got third instead of second. But yeah, I think she raced to win it, and I was happy to see that.
Yeah, I think they all three raced to win it, and I think like major kudos to Ella Wiley. Obviously, Liv Alula Jaco was committed to working for her and trying to win this race, and Adrian Sherensudal was all in for Sarah Gigante in the World Tour Leaders jersey. But I think the climb just wasn't long enough for Gigante to make the difference. It's too much of one of those classic style poppy climbs for it to be a climb that she can ride away on like she did on Wollonga. And so it just wasn't going to go her way. And I think if Sealay, watching it, my husband was like, well, Sealay went too early. She should have gone on the shorter climb that comes next. But at that point, perhaps she would have been able to follow a move that went on the longer climb, but it's a real gamble when you get that close to finish. And I think a climb that short, there's less of a chance that she's going to go solo. So I don't think it was poorly timed. I think it was a great moment to attack. It just didn't go her way that day. And I do think for Sile, like, she'll be eyeing the Olympics later in the year. This is not her target for the year, and that will be in the back of her head when making efforts like this and thinking about her form right now. I think that she's in the perfect position right now, form-wise, that she should be in leading into the classic season, with plenty of time to be able to take a break before the Olympics and have those goals on the calendar for her later in the year. If she was riding like out of her mind right now, I would be like, ooh, I don't know. It's a bit early.
I agree that the second climb's too short. I don't think I can't remember in the men's or the women's race that anyone's really been able to get away properly there. It's after that is the opportunity. I was also wishing that they'd saved Ali Wollaston as the plan B for AG, and I was surprised they didn't. I actually thought they were until she did that really strong pull into the second time up the climb. And I was like, damn, she just like gave everything for Gigante. And, like, I definitely always respect an all-in plan. I like when a team can really commit to one goal, but I just don't think that was the right play for that team that day. Like, as you were saying, Abby, it's just wasn't long enough. It's too punchy.
I'd say, it was a good, totally. I agree. I think Ali's isn't loving being in the bunch a lot. So I think track is absolutely on her mind. Kimberly Lacourt for AG Insurance, she came in 9th, and she got absolutely roasted by the Jayco Lula. She like chopped into their lead out on the first on the first lap, but she was looking really good, and I think to be able to try to get, like, that's her first top 10 finish, and still very early to the road scene. She's a mountain biker and from Mauritius and lives in Stellenbosch, so I thought she did really well. I think Ella Wiley's going to be fantastic for the season, as you guys just mentioned. I think they had to work quite hard to keep her forward in the bunch. Georgie Baker, Alex Manley. And I think when we were talking the Olympics, I think seeing just in the bunch what's affecting the peloton as well is not so much the road race, but is a lot of the roadies who are track riders and just what form they're actually in. A lot of them had track camps leading between Tour Down Under and Cadell's, and just how that affected their readiness and I think just freshness as well. So it is going to be difficult for some teams, particularly like Jayco, who have, Amber Pate, Alex Manley, Georgia Baker, who are all extremely, valuable members, being able to balance them both. And it is a lot harder for the Aussie and Kiwi teams to do that compared to the European teams. And, we were really looking, like, my beacon, who we were following and really backing, was Ruby Rose McGannon for the day, and she just I don't think she just wasn't 100%. She went over and sort of got over as well on that second climb, but honestly just stopped with 5k to go. I don't know if she was sick or what happened, but she came through our group sort of thing and just couldn't really keep pedaling. So I think it's a lot of pressure on the Aussies during this period. There's a lot going on for them, trying to balance family time and the best performance. But I think and also I think Jayco put a lot of pressure on themselves to win this, and it just didn't pan out. What I would love is, I wish that our nationals was this weekend. It's so early in the year to be the first weekend, but as they've gotten those 2 jerseys, so I know they wanted more, but they take that into the next of the year. But it'll be interesting how that affects the UAE tour coming up.
Yeah, I don't know how many riders are doubling up on the Aussie calendar and UAE. But, like, for example, Dominika Bludarczyk, she is currently leading the Women's World Tour now after finishing 5th at TDU, and she already said that she's not going to UAE. Her next race is Valencia, and so she would potentially be wearing the purple jersey in Strade Bianche depending on how that goes. But it will be interesting to see like how the racing shifts between this and UAE. Obviously, UAE is a lot of sprint stages. Last year we had the Reina Wiebes v Charlotte Kool showdown for multiple stages, and then the climbing fiasco that was Elise Longoborghini and Guy Riolini. But this year, I don't know how that will shift with the Olympics, and I know that there's a track World Cup coming up pretty soon after the Aussie block of racing, correct?
Yeah, Nations Cup or something. Yeah, is this coming next week? This week? Yeah. Yep.
So that will be interesting to see how that kind of takes those riders out of contention for UAE, even though that would be potentially a better prep race for them being more flat stages. But yeah, I think like for what it did, the Aussie Summer of Cycling this year, I think it was one of the best that I've seen so far, and mostly because the field was elevated so much from TDU being World Tour, more teams coming over for that. Just the level of racing is rising, I feel like, globally. And so that's trickling over into the Aussie races, especially obviously TDU and Cadell's. And it was great racing. I hope that looking at how the races went this year and the opportunity that it kind of hands to younger riders like Gigante, like Reinhardt, like Bludarczyk, like how that's going to impact the rosters that teams put together going forward for these races, especially next year when it's kind of that post-Olympic lull. I feel like it's going to be such a great opportunity for the Aussie riders and also young riders to kind of get their feet wet.
Yeah, just a couple of other shout outs I think you put down, obviously, around Ruth Edwards coming in fourth. That would have been a great relief for her, I think. And, you'd have a lot more background than me on that, Abby, what that means to her. But I think it was a great redemption for Grace Brown coming in fifth just after a challenging TDU. Sarah Roy in eighth. And, I found that quite inspiring just because she was in the Australian team and a couple like sort of the two us and the two Conti teams, and so the Oz team gets pretty roughed around, and Roy doesn't take any shit, so seeing her up there and just like I think that's a really good example of just she positioned herself really, really well. That I think they rode pretty well for her actually in all of that. And just also a shout out to Neve Bradbury. I'd say she had I didn't see it, but I know when she came back on the first lap, her jersey was ripped and she had obviously crashed, which like terrible timing into that first lap, so to then come back and fight on for 15th, I know she would have been pretty upset to have had that finish, but I think just really positive signs for her European season.
I think that was a good call out. I think she could have definitely gone for a better result, but I was really impressed to see how quick she made it back after a little touchdown. Like it was not very far away from the first time up the climb. She crashed right near that stadium area, which is probably like 3K, maybe less before you start the climb. So yeah, good on her. She would have been pretty down after the race, but I think like such good attitude as well. Obviously crashing and getting back up quickly, it has its own problems, but we don't need to go into them today. But she seemed okay. And I think that was, really just shows her character, I guess, and obviously her form.
How do you guys feel about the Aussie Summer of Cycling in the grand scheme of things?
Gracie?
Tills?
Okay. For me it's a slightly different experience. It's the opportunity and just it's one of the best months of the year. You go into a depression sort of thing when it rolls on after this. So I think the thing is you've just got to be working so hard. I just finished full-time work, and even with that you just the level you need to be training at, the whole level is rising. So it's just like, yes, you're getting better, but that's only moving you with the peloton as well. So just to sort of stay with the development on it. And I think it's just such great opportunities for, yes, younger riders to come in. Many of them they don't need off season, these kids. They just, they keep going, and for new names. And it's always interesting, the names that come out in January, are they the same names that are happening in July? But I think it's a really good gelling moment for the teams. They've had 3 to 4 weeks together, this sort of core group. And I think for the Aussies, Gracie, it's a hard balance in wanting to do really well and trying to balance the only time you get with all your family and friends as well. But then also people who are going well in sort of January, Feb are going pretty well in the classics as well, it seems, at the moment. So I would just like to circle back to Amanda Spratt. I think she had a very challenging summer and knows that she can't be peaking in January, and, she needs to be peaking later in the year. And I think the death of Melissa Hoskins was extremely challenging for many riders in the peloton this summer. And I think, we probably throw around the word courage a bit too much in cycling. It's just cycling. But I think Spratty's ride at Nationals was probably one of the most courageous rides I've seen, in terms of how devastated she was on the start line, talking about Mel, and then the ride that she put in. So I think a lot of them will be able to regroup now and then focus on the European season.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. I think definitely some emotional toll there from the tragic death of Mel. I think it was, obviously we've mentioned plenty of times, probably the best international showing in Australia we've probably ever had, and I think that really added a great depth to the racing. But it seemed as though most people were on a relatively good level. I didn't feel like there was this big range between who was super fit and who was just here for training. I felt like the whole bunch was, racing proper, and I think that came across really well on screen and for the fans. From a race organizational point of view, I think maybe the last few years, but definitely this time around, like we're seeing it in Europe more and more. We saw it at the Tour de France Femme last year, but I definitely felt it. And I was, hearing a lot of people in quite high positions in the race organizations in TDU and Cadell's going, okay, like this is proper racing now. Like, it's not just a women's event, it's a race, and people want to come and see it. People want to talk about it. People want to, I think that they realize that they have something worth marketing better. And I think TDU does a better job, I hate to say, than Cadell's. But I think the product that Cadell's can also produce is really good. And we were treated to a really, really good one-day race. And Tills, I would like to get your opinion on maybe just the feeling that you got on the ground with the teams, in that it's nice to have a midweek race. I think that was good that they threw that in also for women, but it could have been better. And I think it should be a road race for next year, not a crit.
Yeah, I actually sat with the Visit Victoria, who are the sort of the major sponsors of this. So it's great for both events. So both Tour Down Under and Cadell's are backed by the government. So, that gives it a lot more sustainability and future foundation. So, yeah, and I was honest with them. They were quite shocked when I said I would take half the prize money and give us coverage. So that message still hasn't completely gone through, just on how important coverage is. What was paying credit was that they, from the gun, or well before the gun, they had live coverage half an hour before we started, which is rare, and that's a massive, that's huge. So absolutely be celebrated. The crit was a good blowout, but no one saw it, and it was just, it's actually like, you're not racing for money, and you're not racing for coverage, and it's quite dangerous. So, and there was a crash. There was a crash in the final where I was in the sprint, and Sororo Paladin couldn't start the weekend. So that's where it's a bit, the risk versus reward on that. And I know that for them, those two races, the men's and the women's, came quite late. Like they decided them in December, November, December. So I think, and I hope that they take their feedback and hopefully are able to do something else with it. But there is discussion about the Herald Sun Tour coming back. So there could be the potential of adding another UCI race to the January calendar, hopefully. So watch this space. But yeah, one thing I wanted to ask though, because I've gotten to know a lot of the teams and you see them hanging out and all this jazz, is that like, how much does a good vibe add to a result? So I tell you who's got a really good vibe at the moment is obviously EF. Tell you who's got even a better vibe is Corinne Lebecki. And I feel like we're probably going to see the best of Corinne. You know, you can just see her character's just been, it was sort of like suffocated previously and now she's just like out being herself. But the teams that did well had a really good vibe. There wasn't a team that, definitely AG. I think UAE are pretty fairly together. It can be, there's a couple of teams that are a little bit disjointed. You can tell, and there's a few characters that they're not really like, hey, let's all hang out and do TikToks together, which is fine. But I'm curious, how much does a vibe contribute to a good result?
Man, it makes all the difference in the world. I feel like you can really tell if you're like at TDU and Cadell's when everyone's eating together in the same room. You can really tell looking at the teams and the tables the night before the race who's going to have a good race tomorrow. If you're looking at all the tables and there's like a quiet table and everyone's like on their phones or not talking to each other, it's like, okay, well, they're not organized together mentally enough to put it together for a race. It makes such a big difference. Like I remember when I was on United Healthcare, we had a rule, no phones at the table. Like you weren't allowed to have your phone at meals. And it made such a big difference. And I tried to carry that over into rally when I was on the team and they just wouldn't have it. They were like, no, we're going to be on our phones. And I was like, well then like we're not bonding with each other every meal, which is like a huge opportunity for all of us to come together and sit together and you know, like become friends and then work together in the race tomorrow. And so it's a huge difference. I feel like it's really cool to see, like you mentioned, UAE, for a team like them that's so international. There's so many different nationalities on that team, and for them to bond is a huge thing, and it makes a massive difference. And then if you have a team like, you know, like Human Powered Health that's obviously got a little bit more American, if they're not bonding well together, then it says a lot about, you know, the team that they've put together and maybe even the management and how that's affecting the team. So yeah, there's a lot that you can tell.
I wasn't surprised that Visma won, like the way that they've been in this past week, and just their togetherness. It's just a group of school children just, you know, hanging out.
Yeah, we talked about it last week. Yeah.
Well, they're all born in the 2000s. They all get each other.
I know. Makes a big difference.
Imagine being at the table. You wouldn't know what they were talking about. I'd feel so old.
It's terrifying.
Poor boss.
Oh, yeah.
And she's going to sit down at that table and just be like,
what's Riz?
What is a TikTok?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. I would love to be a fly on the wall at the Cadell's. Like Cadell's especially, I feel like has such a unique vibe at the buffet area that I would love to be a fly on the wall. You could really you could tell which teams are walking away from this block of racing like with their work cut out for them. They have a long way to go. And which teams are going into the European season where, you know, the best of the bonding is behind you. You kind of need to have your shit together now before you go into Europe because tensions are going to only rise from this point on. And if you're already on the outs with your team, if your team is already struggling to get along, it doesn't look good for the season at this point.
Yeah, I just hope for Trek that, you know, obviously like last year, their biggest issue was running out of riders. And in the first one-day world tour, they ran out of riders. So,
they must have broken some mirrors or kicked some puppies or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they but in saying that, they are one of the most together teams. So, their absence certainly changed the dynamic of the day. But yeah, for any teams and riders listening, no phones at the dinner table. So I'll try to influence it.
I like that
Yeah.
rule.
It was the best rule. It was such a good rule. I was so bummed on Rally when they were just like, no. And I was like, but guys, we need to come up with inside jokes.
Yeah.
This is the moment.
I do want to get rid of, just going back to like that purple leaders jersey is just stupid. Like, you just when you're in the race as well, it's like, who the fruit is that? Like, you just constantly don't see anyone. And then the other one is just to remember it's the New Zealand champs this weekend. So, and Ali Wollaston, she said to me she wasn't racing. So, someone else will be wearing that. Ella Wiley is turning up. I'm not sure where Ella Harris is up to. She stayed at home, still struggling from some concussion, I think. I don't think she will be lining up, but yeah, I don't think it'll be a huge field there. But yeah, Ali Wollaston will be back in her AG insurance kit. I only say that because I totally lost her in the crit. I couldn't find her. She wasn't in it. Kiwi crit.
I wonder if Neve Fisher-Black is racing.
I don't think she's back in
I would
NZ.
love to see her back.
Yeah.
Shoot. I would love to see her back in that jersey.
Yeah.
She just.
So, yeah. I'm happy to get rid of that leaders jersey. I don't understand it. The men don't have one, do they? They don't have that.
No, they don't. They got rid of that like 20 years ago. And I think the only thing I like about it in like right now, this particular moment in time, is Dominika Blodarczyk. She had this awesome quote on the weekend about how, TV was her first World Tour race. And last year she was racing like local races in Poland, which, have a look at her first cycling and you'll see that she's racked up an impressive number of wins already at UCI races. So it's not like she's brand new to the scene, but her first World Tour race was 2 weeks ago and she's in the World Tour leaders jersey now, which I think is a kind of cool story. But yeah, it's just,
I think you could just be presented
nobody understands
with it.
It doesn't make sense.
Like, it's cool to get it.
You don't
I
have
think,
to wear
but
it.
Yeah, I don't know if you have to wear it. Yeah.
I was going to say, especially when like Demi Vollering is leading it and she's wearing that instead of the Dutch national champs jersey at the tour, it's like, come on.
Yeah. No, yeah. One thing that came up over our conversations a few times was like, just totally switching gears, and when we're talking about vibes and teams, is we sort of spoke about, Visma's had really big changes, but the other team that's had really big changes, Roland. Israel, previously Israel, Premier Tech. Roland is now just Roland. I saw that they were at a team camp. I'm really curious how they're going to go this year, because they lost some really strong riders from their team, and their recruitment are riders that I don't personally know. So yeah, it'll be interesting how they go, because we're just like trying to compare jerseys and who's got jerseys you can see, and they're sort of one of them now. Like I like their red jersey, but yeah, just totally change track. They're going to be interesting how they stay in the World Tour, but they could surprise us.
I'm fully prepared for EF to take their spot in the World Tour, to be honest. But I did write my annual kit review will be out this week, and I believe what I said about Roland was that it was lazy. The jersey was lazy. It's like the least possible amount of time you could put into a jersey design went into Roland.
It's a club kit. But I was segueing when you were saying with Demi wearing the jersey, and you obviously wrote such a good article about Pro Time, is it, coming on board with SD Works and the Tour de France effect? Yeah,
I think this is such an interesting topic because it's something that we've talked about on the podcast before, but obviously like Pro Time is a partner company of SC Works, so it's not a new sponsor coming on, and they sponsored the team last year on a smaller capacity, but they are putting more money into SC Works this year and becoming a naming sponsor on the jersey. And they cited the Tour de France as the reason for that, and how watching the Tour de France this year was one of the reasons that they wanted to back the team even more. And it's not the first team that's had that happen. We have EF Education Cannondale, which basically formed because the Tour de France has come to the women's peloton, an American team. So when they announced that the Tour de France was going to happen, the sponsors of the men's team were like, well, we need to have a women's team. And through a lot of drama and one of the longest running American teams in the peloton folding. We have EF Education Cannondale, but there's multiple teams that have had this happen. Human Powered Health have gone all in for their women's team because the Tour de France as well, and they wanted the World Tour license purely because of the Tour de France. So it's the Tour de France effect, and I think with this new influx of money into SC Works, we can safely say that the Tour de France effect is happening. I don't know, Gracie, I'm curious what you think about this, having been to 2 tours and also been in the women's peloton.
Oh, for sure. But I don't know. I feel like we're preaching to the choir, and we've been harping on for years about how women's cycling is a good investment. So I don't know if I've got much more to add. I just have a few personal gripes that, as a commentator, like, some of these team names is too long. Like, just, I wish that you could have one naming rights sponsor that had to pay more, because, like, we get told a lot by teams, not by anyone else, but the teams, you have to say the name in full. And, like, Team DSM Firmenich Post NL is a good example. I can't say that quickly, but they don't want us to say just DSM or DSM Firmenich. And it's just like, I'm happy to say the sponsors, but, like, it just feels clunky. It doesn't come across that well, I don't think. And I just think that it's good to have naming rights on the jersey, but not for the team name. So that's a tricky one, because, like, I want more sponsors to come into the sport, especially in women's cycling. Oh, and the other gripe is that if a men's team and a women's team are connected, they don't have the same name. Like, the Jayco Alula one gets me every time. It's Live Alula Jayco for the women, and it's Team Jayco Alula for the men. And I just fuck it up every time when I'm commentating.
That is so
because
stupid.
I'm commentating men's stuff as well. And it's just like, and I said FDJ Suez for the men's race yesterday. And it's just like,
Oh, Gracie, you're the only one that's picking that up on that, and the one sponsorship person sitting in the dark room trying to.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. Most fans are very forgiving for the commentary team,
Definitely.
but
That's
it
such a good
still
point.
gets me. I want to do a good
But
job.
the teams aren't.
I want to do a good job for me, and I want to do a good job for the teams and the sponsors, because what we do on air is one of the pillars that keeps the sport alive. So it's just like, it's a bit frustrating. But anyway, it's not a problem that I can solve. I just wanted to say it. I needed to get it off my chest.
It's too bad that you can't have, like, a similar thing to how we have when we do the written pieces, where, like, for the Tour de France Femme, for example, I can't write out Tour de France Femme avec Zwift and every single time I write it. I absolutely love Zwift and everything that they do for women's cycling, but I have to write, the very first time I write it, it's Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, and then from then on it's just Tour de France, and then at a certain point in the article it just becomes the tour. Because you can't, if you're reading it in your head, it becomes, like, really overwhelming if every single time you read Tour de France Femme avec Zwift over and over in an article about the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift.
I've been on that other side of sponsors, though, and Gracie, I know those emails and those, I've sent them myself, that there was that one mention that they didn't mention, our name, but I think, as Gracie said, there's such good points about that. And I just wish, like, ideally, we wish we didn't have any brand names at all, so we could actually create a culture where you can follow, the Boston Celtics or the White Sox or whatever it is, like, and not actually following these brand names, because when they fall away, it sort of takes a little bit of identity of the team that you enjoyed. Visma Lisa Bike, if you were to explain that to someone new to the sport and say, oh, my favorite team is Lisa Bike, say, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It sounds so stupid.
I said Jumbo Visma Lisa Bike in commentary on the weekend, because it just came out. It's just the start of the year.
To be fair, it's January.
Yeah.
Definitely. No. But I think what's interesting about the SD Works one and just how big the effect is that I think SD Works is actually only Netherlands based, or that it's sort of Belgium, Netherlands. Like, it's not a global company when the sport is, it's obviously going to a global audience. I think the biggest thing is that women's sport is still so cheap. It is so cheap for brands to get involved in for the return that they get back. Like I think in the women's I hate having to say the because I don't say the men's World Cup, but the women's soccer World Cup, there was 7-time return on investment. And so if the Commonwealth Bank, the brand that sponsors the Matildas, the Australian team, like they're putting in $1 million and they're getting 7 times
I
back.
thought you sponsored them.
I know they're inspired by me, but a 7 times investment on that $1 million, like the return is great and the investment is still cheap. And so, but there's still just too many dinosaurs that are pulling the purse strings that haven't quite gotten that. Like the amount of brands that are sponsoring lower level men's teams, mid and high level men's teams, where if they put some of that loose change into the women's, invested it into women's, they would see such a greater return on that specific investment. So we're getting there, but there's still a long way to go on that, I think.
Along the lines of this conversation, there was actually one other shout out that I wanted to give for Cadell's, but also for just women's cycling in general, and that's Factor Bikes. Like I think in the episode where we picked our dream teams, we talked about Specialized, we talked about Trek, but one of the brands that's really getting behind the women's peloton is Factor, and you saw that in Cadell's. They were the sole breakaway bike, the sole bike of the breakaway between Co-op Repsol. They're new to sponsoring that team, and also ASA Skip Capital they sponsor. So they were the 2 bikes in the breakaway that was before the laps, and then Audrey Cordon-Rigaud on her Factor for Human Powered Health was also off the front. And they're just all over the peloton from lower level teams up to the World Tour. It's pretty cool to see another bike brand like Canyon coming in and really putting their money where their mouth is and putting their brand into the peloton, and they're all over the peloton this year. So I love that. I love to see that.
Yeah, it's a good shout.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also putting them on brand new bikes. ACA don't have the newest version, but still it's a huge investment locally for that, because Cervelo's the same with our team. They've got juniors, under 23s, men's and women's elite as well. So it's a huge contribution. But yeah, for Factor to put their women's and men's team on unreleased bikes, like that's a huge effort. To have all those bikes and really great paint jobs. So I love that.
They were very pretty in real life.
I know this. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other brand, Abby, I was going to mention this in regards to the Tour de France effect, is that I think it's just a really positive sign. Obviously in the men's side, we're seeing Red Bull take over some of the Bora team. And I think it's been, they only touch sports where they know they can make money. And also a lot of the conversation had been that Red Bull hadn't really gotten fully into cycling because they still weren't sure that it was 100% clean. And so the fact that they have put a huge stake in the ground with the men's team is really exciting. And then obviously, Zoe Baxter announcing that she has been sponsored by Red Bull, which is very cool. And then but also Blanca Vass I saw on the weekend. I think it's her that has that Red Bull helmet at the cyclocross. So I think they're all really positive steps and positive signs, I think, for the investment and stability of the sport.
Mm-hmm. How much do you reckon a Red Bull sponsorship is worth? Like, I'm sure that they're all different for every person, but like, I'd love to know.
I don't know. I imagine that like Polly and Fran Prevost is pulling in a lot more than Zoe, but it's still like, and Chloe also with her, she's also sponsored by Red Bull, obviously. But yeah, I imagine it's a lot. If you look at the amount of money they throw around in other sports. Yeah. I'm curious if they're gonna come in, like Bora's one of the teams that doesn't have a women's team attached.
Yeah, it annoys me because I think they're going to be a really good team, and I don't mind them either. As like I don't love Ineos, I don't think so. Like like
Bora's
they've
got a
never
good
really
vibe.
supported it. Yeah, exactly. And so
minus the bullying accusations that just got thrown around, but
they got a few Aussies there, so it must
with
be a good team.
Ota Brooks.
Yeah,
it's true.
So he just
and great kits.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Anyway, men's cycling,
Johnny
what are we
and
talking
Kaylee
about?
Ronan don't know what they're talking about.
No, I like it too. I think it looks good and it's easy to spot.
Yeah, on the fashion segment, they look way better with the yellow helmet. So then it mixes in. Like, as a rider, one request, like, can I just try to find my own rider in the bunch? That's all I want. Like, if you can see your
Yeah, wait. What's with Human Powered Health's white helmets? Because at team camp they had orange helmets, and I am just super disappointed to see them in the races in Australia wearing white helmets. What is this?
Dunno. Maybe
I want answers.
maybe they
clashing
had
with the
to
bike.
get some Aussie, what brand are they?
Oh, yeah,
Sometimes
that's a good call. That's a good call, Gracie.
maybe
we've got
they're
our
not
own
team
ones.
helmets and they just had to get a bunch last minute here. I
Mm.
don't know. That was be my only guess.
Okay, well we'll see. We'll see at Omloop then, I guess. It's coming up.
Oh
I
gosh.
can't wait.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I know. Such a good appetizer, I will say that. It's such a good appetizer.
Since we're on the fashion topic, I am going to move into what we're obsessed with. Because I posted on my Instagram story, but what I'm obsessed with at the moment is the Professional Women's Hockey League have the walk-in where the players are walking into the stadium before the games, and they like slow it down. They do like the slow-mo walk-in for the players, and some players you can tell just go all out. And I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm totally obsessed with the style and also just the idea of kind of highlighting their off the ice personalities a little bit. And I was thinking about who would absolutely destroy the walk-in for the women. Obviously, we know Demi Vollering has just impeccable style. And Lotte Kopecky would probably show up in her Loco t-shirts. Her own t-shirt brand. But who do you guys think would have a good walk-in?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think it would happen because like it's in our contracts that you have to wear your ugly tracksuit pretty much everywhere.
I'm ignoring that. I'm ignoring that I don't want to see tracksuits. I don't want to see
I'm amazed that
team issue
hockey
clothing.
players are allowed to do it because I feel like most teams have to wear team kit everywhere. Oh, who would be good? All right, like Corinne's got swagger. She's got her own little.
Man, she really does.
She's got some style.
Obviously Alison Jackson's entrances. I don't know about her fashion, but her entrances would be dramatic to say the least. But yeah, there's a couple of sports that do that. I think I would just find that too stressful. I'd love the entrance and like to have my own like entrance music every day. But the stress of having to do like a fashion show, like some of the US soccer players do the same thing, and the basketballers, like I tell you, yeah, and so the Lionesses, the women's UK soccer team, do it pretty well. Like they're still in their team kit, but every day they have like they sort of play a different song, and they all come into that. I would say I tell you who would be good is the Italian on Trek. Is a
Ilaria Sanguinetti.
Yes. She would be banging.
There was a picture that Brody Chapman posted of her tattoo. Like they're all hugging, and so Ilaria's, or Yaya, as I was corrected by my husband, he was like, "Who's Ilaria? Her name's Yaya." But she has Olaf, the snowman from Frozen, tattooed on her arm. Like she seems like she's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun, and like. Yeah, I tried to play cricket with her, and obviously, she got over it pretty quickly. But she was way too cool for that. she's just very cool. So I think I'd put my money on her.
Yeah, and Brady would be a good sidekick as well. Like she's got some good style. Yeah. She's often rocking something cool from an op shop, and she was wearing a Lidl branded bum bag or fanny pack, as you may. Before the race, like at sign on, and I was like, that's good. It was bright yellow and I wanted her to race with it, but I got her to twerk a little bit, so thanks Brady, good job.
That's so true.
But we all know Tiff Cromwell has the wardrobe for it.
Oh yeah,
with her Gucci shoes, she would totally just like it'd almost be unfair.
Tiff actually does do that. She does the Formula One track walk, so it would be unfair.
There's like whole Instagram pages dedicated to her fashion.
Yeah.
That is too stressful. God, that'd be one up.
Oh, I would love it. I would absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I would get so into it. Anyway, what are your guys' obsessions this week to close out the episode?
Oh, mine's a bit of a stretch. I think maybe I've been obsessed watching Succession, but that's just because I go through when I have big tours, or when I go to Europe for 6 or 8 weeks, I have to find something that has enormous amount of series. And like I've done Suits, I've done Gossip Girl, and now I'm into over the last few years. But I actually got into the tennis this past weekend, so it was the Australian Open here. It's always a bit of a come down when we finish all of the Aussie cycling and the Australian Open is over as well. But talking about style and dancing, Sabalenka, who won the women's Open, I've gotten quite into her because I probably judged her a little bit. She's from, she doesn't have a flag. She's from Belarus, and she's so aggressive on the court, and she screams, which is a bit annoying, but she actually seems so fun. Like she's just, and just her story about she never thought she'd win a Grand Slam, and was, lost her father and going to give it all up, and then to come back and win back-to-back Australian Opens is, it's a really good story, and she's just a really good supporter. There's an amazing commentator as well, like a female commentator that's been as an Aussie commentator, and they've just had really great chemistry on the court. And so still women's sport, the Aussie Open was pretty good. I can say I've been obsessed with that, and so I got 2 come downs now. Nothing's going on.
Gracie, how about you?
Oh, there's some good ones. Well, my little baby's just started kicking me, so that's pretty cool.
What? That's
I'm just getting a bit obsessed with that. And then I haven't been reading as much the last few weeks, being away at all the races as well, but I've just been binging a bit. I've been more into the opposite to Tills, like a season that's like less than 8 episodes. That's like my sweet spot at the moment. Just like knock it out. I've watched a few good ones recently. The one I just most recently finished, which it was weird but good if you like kind of odd stuff, but I thought it was really well directed. A story I'd never heard before. You probably have heard it if you are American, but the show was called Angeline, and it was fictionalized but based on a true story of this woman that was famous for being famous before that was a thing. So this was back in the 80s in LA and Hollywood, and she's played by Emmy Rossum, who I used to love in Shameless and a number of other things, but she was actually really good in this role, very unrecognizable. And it was only 5 episodes of 45 minutes, and it was just eye candy, but also a bit quirky and actually quite clever in a few ways. So I'd recommend that if you just want an easy, quick watch.
Gracie, I always find you've got like quite intelligent recommendations. like you've got really good, if I was to go to a dinner party and I needed to impress people with my intelligence, I need to call you up rather than being so basic bitch saying Gossip Girl.
Oh, don't worry. Kimberly and I just started the OC. We have a shit show going always.
Yes.
Like we still haven't finished Charmed, but we're like, let's start the OC. It's time. So you got to have like good shows and shit shows, because your brain just wants a little break sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need something playing.
Yeah. So you can scroll on your phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks you both so much for chatting women's cycling with me. Tills, thanks for joining us again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, team.
Yeah, we'll be back next week.
Classics are coming.
UAE Tour is the 8th through the 11th, but check out the Wheel Talk newsletter for more information about that. And as always, let us know your thoughts on the Discord. We're all there.
Włodarczyk. So it's Dominika Włodarczyk. Włodarczyk.